Oh, 526? Didn't we do that last time, 26? Let me see. Reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, entitled Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness, text number 26. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Kama Krodha Vimuktanam. Kama Krodha Vimuktanam. Yatinam Yatacheshatam. Yatinam Yatateshatam. Abhito Brahma Nirvanam. Abhito Brahma Nirvanam. Vartate Viditatmanam. Vartate Viditatmanam. Kama Krodha Vimuktanam. Yatinam Yatachetasam. Abhito Brahma Nirvanam. Vartate Viditatmanam. Kama Krodha Vimuktanam. Yatinam Yatachetasam. Abhito Brahma Nirvanam. Vartate Viditatmanam. Kama Krodha Vimuktanam. Yatinam Yatichetasam. Abhito Brahma Nirvanam. Vartate Viditatmanam. Kama Krodha Vimuktanam. Hare Goma Vinirnanam. Vartate Viditatmanam. Kama Krodha Vimuktanam. Kama, from desires, Krodha, and anger, Vimuktanam, of those who are liberated, Yatinam, of the saintly persons, Jatatesasam, who have full control over the mind, Abhitaha, assured in the near future, Brahma Nirvanam, liberation in the Supreme. Vartate is there. Vidita Atmanam, of those who are self-realized. Translation, those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. Purport. Of the saintly persons who are constantly engaged and striving towards salvation, one who is in Krishna consciousness is the best of all. The Bhagavatam 4:22-39 confirms this fact as follows. Yapada panka palasa vilaspakya karma sayang grihitam udghatayanti santaha tadvam narikta matayo yutai rudha shroto gandastam ardanam bhaja vasudevam. Just try to worship in devotional service Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even great sages are not able to control the forces of the senses as effectively as those who are engaged in transcendental bliss by serving the lotus feet of the Lord, uprooting deep-grown desire for fruitive activities. In the conditioned soul, the desire to enjoy fruitive results of work is so deep-rooted that it's very difficult even for the great sages to control such desires. Despite great endeavors, a devotee of the Lord, constantly engaged in devotional service and Krishna consciousness, perfect in self-realization, very quickly attains liberation in the Supreme. Owing to his complete knowledge and self-realization, he always remains in trance. To cite an analogous example of this, Darshana Dhyana Sangsparshaya Matcha Kurma Vihagana Maha Swanya Patyani Pushnanti Tataham Apipatmaja. By vision, by meditation, and by touch only do the fish, the tortoise, and the birds maintain their offspring. Similarly do I also, O Padmaja. The fish brings up its offspring simply by looking at them. The tortoise brings up its offspring simply by meditation. The eggs of the tortoise are laid on land, and the tortoise meditates on the eggs while in the water. Similarly, the devotee in Krishna consciousness, although far away from the Lord's abode, can elevate himself to that abode simply by thinking of him constantly. By engagement in Krishna consciousness, he does not feel the pangs of material misery. This state of life is called Brahma Nirvana, or the absence of material miseries, due to being constantly immersed in the Supreme. So, this verse, Kama Krodha Vimuktanam, in the life that we live, these two things affects everyone. What are those two things? Kama, desire. And the other one is Krodh. Krodh means anger. So everyone has desires. They have desires to try to be happy in the material world. No one wants to be unhappy. Everyone wants to be happy in life, right? And they're ready to work hard so that they can get happiness. No one is looking for unhappiness, right? No one's going to the shopper's stop looking for a bottle of unhappiness. But it comes. But people think that if I work hard, I can increase my happiness. Today I have this much happiness. If I work hard, I can get this much happiness. Right? Today my salary is so much, but if I work hard, my salary will become so much more, and then I'll be happy. Right? But that's not the way it works. We learn from Shastra, we learn from Srimad Bhagavatam. Prahlad Maharaj says that just as in this life, we're not seeking misery, but misery comes without seeking. In the same way, according to our prarabdha, our previous acts in a previous life, so much happiness will come. That's fixed. The unhappiness is fixed and the happiness is also fixed. So working with the idea that I will get some fruit and I will enjoy that is completely a waste of time. It's a waste of time. Rather, Prahlad Maharaj says that we should work in such a way that we are becoming free from kam and krodh. These are unwanted qualities, lusty desires, and becoming angry. People meditate on sense gratification, and when we become frustrated in sense gratification, due to that frustration we become angry. So Krishna is talking about someone who's vimuktanam. He's already over this desire and this anger. He's finished with it. So how do you become finished with desire and anger? So yatinam yatachetasam. Yatinam means saintly persons. Yatachetasam, we have full control of the mind. So Krishna is explaining that those who become free from kama and krodha, they do that because they have control over the mind. The mind is controlled. When our mind is out of control, then we become affected by kama and krodha. We become upset. We become angry. We become frustrated. But the saintly persons, they're vimuktanam. They don't become controlled by the kama and by the anger. Why? Because their minds are controlled. Then Krishna goes on to say, one can, if one works like this with a controlled mind, then very quickly one can be assured of Brahma Nirvanam. Brahma Nirvanam means spiritual happiness, spiritual satisfaction. So now the question is how to obtain this Brahma Nirvanam, spiritual happiness, spiritual satisfaction. We have to understand that this material world is not our original place. We don't belong here. Just like this body was born in America, so people say that he's a foreigner. In India, I'm a foreigner. He's foreigner. In Calcutta side, they say Saib. Wo Saib hai. Saib. Means foreigner. And if you're Indian, you're not a foreigner. You're a Bharatvashi. You live here. But actually, everyone is foreigner. Because this material world is not our place. This is not our home. We don't belong here. In the first part of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna clearly says, Nahanyate hanyamani sharire, that the soul is never killed, never dies. Only the body dies. So in this life we're thinking, I'm an American, I'm Indian, I'm Russian, I'm Ukrainian. But that's the body. And for this lifetime. What about last life? Which body did you have in your last life? Which body will you get in your next life? Right? So why am I thinking that in this life I'm this or that? This is called moha, illusion. And due to this moha or illusion, because I think I am this body, whatever it is, Indian American or Russian or whatever, therefore I'm affected by kama and krodh. So how to become free from the bodily concept of life? This the sages have, is a real practice of yoga is for this. Yoga is not meant to improve your health. Yoga is not meant to help you lose weight. That's not the purpose of yoga. The purpose of yoga is to bring us out of the bodily concept of life, to help us understand that we are soul, we are Atma, Atmanam. In the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is explaining this to Arjuna. This is the very first thing we have to learn in spiritual life. That we're not this body, we're the spirit soul. And if we can understand this, then what will be the result? The result will be that we'll want to engage ourselves in the service of the Supreme Spirit Soul. We're Spirit Soul, and we are attached to the Supreme Spirit Soul. So this verse explains that for those who are attached to the Supreme Spirit Soul, they experience their Brahma Nirvana, or their spiritual identity. Right now we have some other identity, a temporary identity. I'm from this state, or this community, or this, right? Temporary, because it's going to change. It's not going to last forever. It will change. So what's our permanent identity? Our permanent identity is explained by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as Nityo Nityanam. What is it? Nitya Krishna Das. Nitya Krishna Das. That I'm the eternal servant of Krishna. Right? That's our real identity, permanent identity. So how to realize in this age, the method for realizing that I'm the eternal spirit soul is to chant the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam, kalo anasteva, nasteva, nasteva, ghatir anyata. That in this age of Kali, the method to understand Brahma Nirvanam, how to be situated in our identity as eternal spirit soul, is to chant, the only way is by chanting of the holy name of the Lord. So this verse is very important and instructive, and we'll read the next verse. Sparshan kritva bahir bhalyangs chakshush chaivam tare bruvo prana bhano samo kritva basab yantard charino yatendriya mano budhir munir moksha parayanaha vigatstech cha bhaya krodho ya sada mukta eva ya. Translation: shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, intelligence, the transcendentalist, aiming at liberation, becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who's always in this state is certainly liberated. Purport: being engaged in Krishna consciousness, one can immediately understand one's spiritual identity, and then one can understand the Supreme Lord by means of devotional service. When one is well situated in devotional service, one comes to the transcendental position, qualified to feel the presence of the Lord in the sphere of one's activity. The particular position is called liberation in the Supreme. After explaining the above principles of liberation in the Supreme Lord gives instruction to Arjuna as to how one can come to the position by the practice of the mysticism of yoga known as Ashtanga Yoga, which is divisible into eightfold procedure called Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayam, Pratyahara, Dharani, and Dhyan, and Samadhi. In the 6th chapter, the subject of yoga is explicitly detailed, and at the end of the 5th chapter, it is only preliminarily explained. One has to drive out the sense objects, such as sound, touch, form, taste, and smell, by the pratyahara process of yoga, and then keep the vision of the eyes between the two eyebrows and concentrate on the tip of the nose with half-closed lids. There's no benefit in closing the eyes altogether, because then there is every chance of falling asleep. Nor is there any benefit in opening the eyes completely, because then there is the hazard of being attracted by sense objects. The breathing movement is restrained within the nostrils by neutralizing the up-moving and down-moving air within the body. By practicing of such yoga, one is able to gain control over the senses, refrain from outward sense objects, and thus prepare oneself for liberation in the Supreme. This yoga process helps one become free from all kinds of fear and anger, and thus feel the presence of the Supersoul in the transcendental situation. In other words, Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of executing yoga principles. This will be thoroughly explained in the next chapter. A Krishna conscious person, however, being always engaged in devotional service, does not risk losing his senses to some other engagements. This is a better way of controlling the senses by the Ashtanga Yoga. So, again, controlling the senses. We have information from the Vedic literature about yogis. They try to control the senses, right? But even though they practice yoga for a very long time, because they're not situated in attachment to the Supreme Lord in Bhakti Yoga, it's very difficult for them to control the senses. But for the Bhakti Yogi, he can very easily control the senses. There's a story about Subari Muni. He was meditating under the water for many thousands of years. Previously, people lived for a very long time, and therefore they could practice yoga for a long time. So he was meditating, and he saw two fish having sex, and he became agitated. And he fell down with one heavenly maiden, and all his yoga practice was over until he woke up. But then there's the example of the Bhakta, Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur was a bhakti yogi, and Haridas Thakur chanted the holy name of the Lord 100,000 times a day. He was chanting. So he was fixed. And even though he was tempted for enjoyment by Maya Devi herself, he was not attracted because he was fixed in his attachment to the Supreme Lord and to the Supreme Lord's holy name. So we can understand that although these yoga practices are mentioned, meditating on the tip of the nose and controlling the life airs and sitting, right? That's all well and good. But in this age, if it's not accompanied with the chanting of the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram. One will not get the result. And we see here, what is the result? Freedom from lusty desires and anger. Become free from lusty desires and anger. So, we should practice this chanting and practice this form of bhakti yoga. It's recommended in this age, and it's the only process that can help us become free from these unwanted qualities, kam, krodh, lobha, matsarja. Right? So are there any questions? Mike?
Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
Prabhuji is asking that when someone dies at home, so that time that till 12 days or 14 days, that person's pindadan does not becomes. So his atma, does he release, like where he goes, that atma?
When someone dies,
Yes.
where does that Atma go?
Till 14 days, that before, till Pindadan, that Pitradan or Pindadan we say, they do in ritualistic way, Karmakand way.
You see, these are all ceremonial things, but the soul goes immediately into the next womb within a second. When the soul leaves the body, it's by the Daiva by the material nature, by the dictation of material nature, the soul enters into the womb of another mother. Like that, within a second. Now, Prabhupada was discussing, and he was asked this very same question. How much time does it take after you die to go to the next womb? And Prabhupada said, within a second. So our conception of time is based on, the sun and rising and setting, and that's a day, and how much is a second, and how much is a minute, right? But that's all relative to this world. In the spiritual world, there's no past. There's no future. How do we understand past and future? Because we see everything is changing. A flower, it looks very beautiful for a little while, and then it shrivels up and looks ugly. So we understand past and future by observing the material nature. But there is no material nature in the spiritual world. Everything is eternal, ever fresh. So this concept of time that we have is based on our own conditional experience, right? And within that flickering of a moment, when you leave this body, you can go into the next room. At the same time, you can go to the court of Yamaraj, be punished. Everything will happen, and you'll be in the next room. Just take a second. But if you don't want to take birth in another womb, the process is there, explained by Lord Krishna, the yoga process, and the next chapter will get into the yoga process so that one can become clear about how to use this very important human form of life to progress to the spiritual world, our real home, and not have to come back here to this temporary, miserable material world. It's a miserable place. Look at how hot it is. It's so hot. Everybody's sweating, right? Look at that. So we think, well, we got the fan. We'll turn on the fan. We'll enjoy the fan. But you're not enjoying the fan. We have the fan to minimize the suffering. It's not enjoyment. It's called trying to adjust the material nature to minimize the suffering. The heater in the winter and the fan in the summer, right? That's not enjoyment. Mitigation of your suffering is not enjoyment. Real enjoyment is spiritual enjoyment. And spiritual enjoyment is in relation to the Supreme Spirit, Lord Krishna. Understanding our relationship with Krishna, developing our relationship with Krishna through the process of bhakti yoga is the way to experience unlimited happiness, eternal happiness, even in this very life. And at the end of this life, to go back to our real home, our eternal home, with Krishna in the spiritual world. Any other questions?
My question is, when the soul is no longer here, like it's in the heaven, so we are told that, whatever you do on that behalf of soul, you do the good things that will transfer to that soul. Is it true or no? Like the soul who is no longer living here.
Does the soul what?
The soul which is in the heaven right now. I mean, whatever we do on behalf of that soul, that good deeds that transfer to them, or is it that we are doing for our own sake, like for our satisfaction, that this deeds that we're doing, it's going to go there and for their betterment?
Well, yeah, there's a Vedic prescription for departed souls, and that on their behalf you can perform some Vedic prescriptions, so they'll be benefited, like the ancestors, right? And they do that during the Pitri Praksh, Shraddh ceremony, so that our ancestors, father, grandfather, they get some benefit by the performance of those Vedic prescriptions, ceremonies. But all of those things are taken care of very nicely by the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. You're benefited, and all your relatives are also benefited. If you chant the holy name of the Lord purely, there's a quality to that chanting. We need to chant without offense, and there's 10 offenses to be considered in the chanting of the holy name. So if we chant the holy name purely, without offense, all of the things that are benefited for departed souls and for our own soul are immediately available through the pure chanting of the holy name of the Lord. That's the special benefit of Kali Yuga. Any other questions? Okay. Oh.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji is asking, after suicide, what happens to the soul?
What's that?
After suicide, what happens to the soul? Suicide, after suicide. One does a suicide.
Well, whatever happens to the soul is up to Krishna. Krishna is in control of what happens to the soul. But generally speaking, if someone commits suicide, they get a ghost body. Means they have a subtle body, but they don't have a gross body. And because we have so many desires, and we're not able to express those desires because we don't have a material body, those persons that commit suicide in their next life, they suffer very much. So people think that commit suicide, by committing suicide, they'll be free from the suffering, but they only increase their suffering more and more. The real solution to the problem that we have is always to take shelter of Krishna, and specifically by taking shelter of Krishna by chanting his holy name, then we can come free from all the suffering. Is that okay? Hare Krishna. Yes. Microphone? He'll bring you the microphone. Make sure the mic is working. It's not working.
Hello. How one can leave this material world, as you said, how to liberate from this material world? What is the process?
How to?
How to
Liberation. Liberation.
From this material world.
Free from the material world.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is the process for that?
The process, as I mentioned, in this age, is through the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. By chanting this Hare Krishna Mahamantra, one can obtain the highest liberation, which is love for Krishna. Everyone is looking for relationships, but the relationships here in this material world are always temporary and they got problems, right? Today you're my friend, tomorrow you're my enemy, right? But Krishna's not like that. Once Krishna is your friend, Krishna is always our friend, right? Surinam Sarvabhutanam, he's a friend of everyone. But we have lost that friendly feeling towards Krishna. and we're trying to make friends with everyone else and forgetting Krishna. But our real friend is Krishna. I'm your friend if I tell you Krishna is your only friend. Then I'm your real friend if I tell you Krishna is your only friend. Because it's true. One day someone is friend, next day they're enemy. One day you give them a loan because he's your friend, he never pays you back. But Krishna is not like that. Krishna is always looking for our welfare. Whatever we have, He's given us. You breathe air, comes from Krishna. You eat food, comes from Krishna. Everything He's given us. But yet, we don't think of Him. We don't pay Him any attention. So, by chanting His holy name, gradually we develop that relationship with Krishna. Gradually. And by associating with people who have relationships with Krishna, means the devotees, the Bhakta Sangha, then you can develop your relationship with Krishna. And at the end of this life, you go back to Krishna, that's real liberation. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Shri Radha Rasvihari ki, Shri Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Nitai Gaur Premanandi.